Kit Chain had learned a long time ago that fear was useless when someone was dying in front of him. Fear could come later, after the bleeding stopped, after the monitors stopped screaming, after the body in front of him either survived or became another name he would remember in the dark. That was how he had survived his years as a battlefield medic. That was how he survived night shifts at the city hospital. And that was how he survived being an Omega father raising 2 little boys alone. At 11:47 p.m., Kit was standing at the nurse's station, signing off on a patient's chart while trying not to think about the twins sleeping at home under Mrs. Marin's watch. Aiden and Lucan had begged him not to work another night shift, but Rent did not care about bedtime stories, and hospital bills did not care that he was tired. His old mate, Braun Chase, used to say Kit had the hands of someone who refused to let the world win. Braun had been gone for years now, lost in a military operation Kit had never been given the full truth about. Since then, Kit had built a smaller life. Hospital, apartment, twins, survival. Then the emergency room doors burst open. The sound hit first. Heavy boots, shouting, the snap of weapons being raised. Nurses froze in the hallway as armed men in dark suits flooded the ER with the cold precision of people who were used to being obeyed. A broad-shouldered man with a scar near his mouth pointed a gun toward the ceiling, not firing, only making sure everyone understood he could. Nobody calls the police. Nobody leaves. We need your best doctor now. 2 men dragged in a third between them. The injured man was barely conscious. His shirt and jacket were soaked through with blood. One arm hung uselessly at his side. His breathing was shallow, uneven, and wrong. Dr. Halden, the attending trauma surgeon, stepped forward with both hands raised. Put him on the gurney. We can help him, but you need to lower your weapons. The scarred man turned the gun slightly toward him. If he dies, this whole room dies with him. The threat chilled everyone into silence. Kit moved before anyone gave him permission. He pushed a gurney into place and helped transfer the wounded man onto it. Up close, he could see the wounds clearly. Chest, abdomen, shoulder. Too much blood loss. Too much pressure building where it should not be. The man on the gurney was an enigma. Kit knew it before anyone said his name. Enigmas were rare, powerful, and dangerous in the ABO hierarchy, the kind of presence most people felt before they understood why their instincts were warning them. Even half dead, this man carried that heavy pressure in the air. Name? Kit asked sharply. The scarred man hesitated for half a second. Alfie Romani. The room changed. Not loudly. No one screamed. No one ran. But every doctor, nurse, and orderly suddenly understood who had just been brought into their ER. Alfie Romani. The Mafia king. The black enigma. The man people whispered about but never wanted to meet. Dr. Halden swallowed. We need to prep her too. 15 minutes. Kit looked at the monitor. The numbers were falling too fast. He doesn't have 15 minutes. Halden shot him a warning look. Kit. He has a massive hemothorax, maybe cardiac tamponade. If we wait, he dies before anesthesia. The monitor screamed. Alfie's heart rhythm collapsed into chaos, then into one terrible continuous tone. The scarred man raised his gun. Kit stepped between the weapon and the table without thinking. Put that down and listen to me. I can open his chest here, right now, but if you threaten my staff again, you'll waste the only seconds he has left. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the scarred man lowered the gun a fraction. Do it. Kit's hands became steady. Thoracotomy tray. Chest tube kit. Suction. O-negative blood. Move. The ER exploded back into motion. A resident ran for supplies. A nurse cut away Alfie's shirt. Halden looked horrified, but when Kit snapped, "Bag him," the doctor obeyed. Kit made the incision with battlefield speed and hospital precision. Blood welled up instantly. Someone gasped behind him, but Kit did not look away. He opened the chest, spread the ribs, and found exactly what he feared. The sac around Alfie's heart was swollen with trapped blood. Tamponade, Kit said. Suction. His gloves were slick. His sleeves were red. His heartbeat was calm in the way it only became when everything depended on his hands. He cut into the pericardium and blood rushed out. 1 second passed. Then another. The heart twitched. The monitor shifted from a flat scream to a weak, broken beep. Someone whispered, "He's back." Kit did not celebrate. Clamp. More suction. Start transfusion now. A nurse returned with blood bags, panic on her face. "We don't have enough compatible units. His type is rejecting the first match." Kit's stomach tightened. "Run mine." Halden stared at him. "Kit, no. Run mine. You're an Omega. His biology is Enigma. That compatibility is almost impossible. Then test it before he dies." The nurse took Kit's blood sample with shaking hands. Minutes became knives. The result came back faster than anyone expected. Compatible. The room went silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Stranger. Almost afraid. Kit rolled up his sleeve. "Take what you need." Halden lowered his voice. "This is dangerous. You know what Enigma-compatible Omega blood can trigger. I know what death triggers too. Move." So they took his blood. Kit felt the needle bite his arm while his other hand remained inside Alfie Romani's open chest, keeping the man alive beat by beat. He did not think about what it meant. He did not think about rare compatibility, pheromone shock, Enigma response, or the strange warmth spreading under his skin as Alfie's body accepted his blood. He thought only of Aiden and Lucan. He thought of 2 little boys waiting for him to come home. And he thought of Braun, who had once told him saving a life always mattered, even when the person being saved was dangerous. By the time Alfie was stable enough to move to surgery, Kit's legs were weak, but his hands were still steady. The Mafia men watched him now with something close to fear. The scarred man stepped beside him. "You saved Alfie Romani." Kit pulled off his blood-soaked gloves. "I saved a patient. Do you understand what that means?" Kit looked at him, exhausted and unimpressed. "It means he needs antibiotics, close monitoring, and a surgeon who doesn't freeze under pressure." For the first time, the scarred man almost smiled. "My name is Jacob, and he will want to know yours." Kit did not answer. Hours later, after surgery, Alfie was placed in a private ICU room under heavy guard. The hospital director, Dean Voss, appeared with a pale face and a strained smile, promising cooperation while clearly wishing the Mafia would vanish from his hospital before sunrise. Kit wanted to go home. He wanted to shower. He wanted to kiss his sleeping sons on the forehead and pretend this night had not happened. Then Alfie Romani opened his eyes. Even weakened by blood loss and surgery, his gaze was sharp enough to silence the room. His eyes moved over the guards, the machines, the doctors, then stopped on Kit. "You," Alfie said, voice rough. Kit stepped closer despite himself. "You need to stay still. You almost died." Alfie studied him as if trying to remember something from the edge of death. "Name." "Kit Chain." Faint pause. Then Alfie turned his head slightly toward Jacob, though his eyes never left Kit. "No one touches him." Jacob straightened. "Understood." Alfie's breathing was shallow, but his command filled the room. "No one threatens him. No one follows him without my order. No one uses him." Kit felt a cold pressure settle in his chest. "I don't need protection." Alfie's gaze held his. "You saved my life. In my world, that means something." Kit wanted to say that in his world, it had only been his job. But Alfie's eyes closed before he could answer, exhaustion dragging him under again. By morning, Kit finally left the hospital. He thought that would be the end of it. It was not. A courier arrived at his apartment before noon with a black envelope and a bank document worth more money than Kit could earn in 10 lifetimes. The message was simple. "For the life you returned to me." Kit sent it back unopened. That night, Jacob called him. "Mr. Romani wants to know why you refused." Kit was packing lunchboxes for the twins with one hand and holding the phone with the other. "Tell Mr. Romani I don't sell medical care. He doesn't understand people refusing him." "Then this will be educational." There was silence on the line. Then Jacob said quietly, "You're either very brave or very stupid." Kit looked toward the bedroom, where Aiden and Lucan were asleep tangled together under one blanket. "I'm a father. That makes me both." The next morning, Kit walked his sons to their kindergarten as usual. Aiden complained about oatmeal. Lucan held his hand and asked if he would be home for dinner. Kit promised he would try. Then he turned the corner and stopped. 12 black cars lined the street outside the school. Parents stood frozen on the sidewalk. Teachers whispered near the gate. And beside the first car stood Alfie Romani, pale from injury but upright, holding 2 small breakfast boxes in his hands. Aiden blinked up at him. Lucan whispered, "Papa, is that the patient who almost died?" Kit's heart dropped. Alfie looked at the twins, then at Kit. And for the first time since Kit had met the Mafia king, the dangerous enigma seemed completely unsure what to say. The entire street outside the kindergarten seemed frozen in disbelief as 12 black luxury vehicles occupied nearly every parking space in sight, while nervous parents stood whispering among themselves and teachers watched from behind the school gate with expressions that shifted between curiosity and alarm. In the center of all that attention stood Alfie Romani, arguably the most feared enigma in the city, holding 2 neatly packed breakfast boxes as if arriving at a kindergarten with gifts for children was the most natural thing in the world. Kit honestly could not decide whether he wanted to laugh, scream, or drag the man back into one of those vehicles and order him to leave. Aiden broke the silence first. "Papa, he really is the patient who almost died." Lucan studied Alfie for another moment before looking up thoughtfully. "He looks less dead today." Several bodyguards immediately lowered their heads, clearly trying not to react. For the first time, Alfie appeared slightly caught off guard. Then he slowly held out the breakfast boxes. "You forgot breakfast." Kit stared at him. "No, I didn't. You packed lunch." Alfie's gaze shifted toward the bag hanging from Kit's shoulder. "You forgot breakfast." The annoying part was that he was right. After returning from the hospital, surviving less than 3 hours of sleep, and waking up late, Kit had rushed the twins out the door with only juice boxes and promises that they would eat properly later. Aiden accepted one of the boxes immediately. Lucan accepted the second. "Thank you, Mr. Mafia." Kit nearly choked. One of the bodyguards actually coughed. Alfie remained expressionless. "You're welcome." Then Aiden asked the question every parent fears. "Are you dating our papa?" The entire street became silent. Kit closed his eyes. Somewhere nearby, a teacher dropped a pen. Alfie looked directly at the twins, completely ignoring the dozen adults pretending not to listen. "No." "Oh." Aiden sounded disappointed. Lucan nodded seriously. "Maybe later." This time several bodyguards physically turned away. Kit finally grabbed both children by the shoulders and guided them toward the school entrance before the situation became even worse. As he passed Alfie, he lowered his voice. "You cannot keep showing up like this." Alfie's answer came immediately. "You refused my money. Because I'm not taking money from a mafia boss. You refused my protection. I don't need protection." Alfie's eyes held his for a moment. "That remains to be seen." Before Kit could respond, one of the teachers called the twins inside, ending the conversation for now. Unfortunately, that did not mean the rest of the day became easier. By noon, half the hospital had somehow learned that Alfie Romani had personally delivered breakfast to Kit's children. The story evolved every time it was repeated. By lunch break, some nurses were claiming the Mafia king had proposed marriage outside the kindergarten. Kit considered transferring to another state. Instead, he focused on work. That proved difficult when 2 detectives appeared near the nurse's station shortly before the end of his shift. The woman introduced herself as Detective Avery Brennan. Her partner was Detective Miguel Ortiz. The moment Kit saw their badges, he knew exactly why they were there. "We only need a few minutes." "I don't." Brennan ignored the response. "You saved Alfie Romani. I treated a patient. You have access to him. I have access to medical charts." Ortiz stepped in with a more sympathetic approach. "We're not asking you to do anything dangerous." Kit almost laughed. Every dangerous request in history had started with that sentence. The conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes. By the end of it, the detectives had made their position clear. They wanted information, names, conversations, movements, anything connected to Alfie's organization. Kit refused every version of the request. Eventually Brennan's patience wore thin. "You have children, don't you?" The temperature around him seemed to drop. "Leave my children out of this. We're trying to prevent them from getting hurt." "No," Kit said quietly. "You're trying to use them." For a moment neither detective responded. Then Brennan handed him a card. "Call us if you change your mind." Kit waited until they left before throwing the card directly into a trash bin. The problem was that the day only became stranger after that. Several hours later he was reviewing patient records when he noticed a discrepancy in the hospital database. At first it seemed insignificant. A missing file, then another, then 3 more. Most staff would never have noticed. Military medical training had made Kit obsessive about documentation. Missing records bothered him. Missing records involving Omega patients bothered him even more. He spent the next hour carefully tracing archived files. The deeper he looked, the worse the pattern became. Several Omega patients had disappeared from the system entirely. A few pediatric records showed unexplained transfers. Some blood samples had been reassigned to different identification numbers. It almost looked as though someone had been cleaning evidence. Then he found the signature. Dean Voss, hospital director. Kit frowned. Dean had always seemed professional, supportive, the kind of administrator everyone respected. Yet his name appeared repeatedly in places it should not. That alone might not have meant anything. Then he found another file. A laboratory request. Genetic screening. ABO compatibility analysis. The patient names were redacted. The collection dates were not. Kit froze. Those dates matched a recent school health screening program. The same program Aiden and Lucan had participated in. A strange feeling crawled up his spine. He immediately checked the authorization chain. Someone had accessed the twins' biological data. Not once. Several times. The request trail disappeared before reaching the final recipient. Whoever had done it knew how to hide their tracks. By the time Kit left the hospital, evening had already fallen. His mind remained fixed on those records as he walked toward the employee parking garage. The concrete structure felt unusually empty. Too empty. His military instincts reacted before his conscious mind did. Something was wrong. A figure moved near the far end of the garage. Then another. Then a third. Kit stopped walking. The men stopped too. None of them wore hospital uniforms. None looked lost. One began moving toward him. Then all 3 did. Kit's pulse accelerated. Years ago he might have fought. Years ago he might have reached for a weapon. Now he was a father first. His only priority was getting home alive. He turned sharply toward the stairwell. The men accelerated. Footsteps echoed through the garage. One shouted something. Kit didn't stop to hear it. The distance between them closed rapidly. Then another sound erupted through the garage. An engine. A black SUV burst around the corner so fast that tires screamed against concrete. The vehicle skidded sideways between Kit and his pursuers. Doors flew open. Men in dark suits emerged. Armed. Organized. Dangerous. The 3 attackers immediately changed direction. Too late. Within seconds they were pinned against parked vehicles with weapons pointed at them. Kit recognized one of the newcomers immediately. Jacob. The scarred lieutenant stepped forward. His expression was colder than usual. "You should leave." The attackers looked terrified. Not of the police. Not of prison. Of Jacob. Kit stared at him. "You've been following me. Protecting you. I told Alfie I didn't need protection." Jacob's gaze moved toward the restrained men. Good thing he disagreed. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then one of the captured men suddenly shouted, "We only wanted the blood samples." The garage fell silent. Kit felt every muscle in his body lock. Blood samples. Not money. Not kidnapping. Not robbery. Blood samples. Jacob's expression darkened instantly. The attacker seemed to realize he had said too much. A moment later another suited man slammed him against the vehicle before he could continue. Kit's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The files. The missing records. The genetic testing. The unauthorized access to his son's information. None of it was random. Someone wanted something. And somehow Aiden and Lucan were involved. Jacob pulled out his phone. His eyes never left the captured men. Mr. Romani needs to hear about this immediately. As Kit stared at the terrified attacker and replayed those words over and over in his head, a cold realization began forming. Someone had been watching his family long before Alfie Romani entered their lives. And whoever they were, they had just made the first move. The drive away from the parking garage felt far longer than it actually was, partly because Kit spent the entire journey replaying the attack in his head, and partly because the words blood samples refused to leave him alone. Whoever had approached him had not demanded money, had not tried to kidnap him, and had not even mentioned Alfie Romani. They had wanted biological data, which somehow felt far more disturbing because it suggested planning, patience, and a purpose he still could not understand. The black SUV eventually entered a gated property on the outskirts of the city, passing through 2 separate security checkpoints before stopping in front of a sprawling modern estate surrounded by trees and high walls. Kit immediately disliked it. It was beautiful in the expensive way only powerful people could afford, but it also felt like a cage disguised as a sanctuary. The front door opened before he reached it. 2 small figures came running across the entrance hall. "Papa!" The impact nearly knocked the breath out of him as Aiden and Lucan launched themselves into his arms. For several seconds Kit forgot about blood samples, missing records, and mafia organizations. He simply held his sons tightly while listening to them talk over each other. "There's a movie room. They have 3 dogs. One of the guards taught us card tricks. There's a game room." Kit blinked. "A game room? Yes. And a giant TV. And a chef. And a swimming pool." The twins looked far too excited for children who had supposedly been placed under protective custody. A familiar voice sounded from the staircase. "I see they've adjusted well." Kit looked up. Alfie stood near the landing, still recovering from his injuries but looking considerably healthier than he had in the hospital. He wore dark casual clothes instead of a suit, and for the first time Kit could almost understand why people forgot how dangerous he was when he was not actively reminding them. "Almost. You moved my children into a mansion. I moved them somewhere safe. You could have asked first." Alfie descended the stairs slowly. "You would have said no." Kit hated that this was probably true. The twins immediately abandoned him and ran toward Alfie. "Papa Alfie." Alfie sighed. "I told you not to call me that. You never actually stop us." "That is because explaining it every day is exhausting." Aiden grinned. "Then we win." Alfie looked genuinely defeated. Kit watched the interaction in disbelief. The man who terrified politicians, criminals, and police departments somehow kept losing arguments to 2 6-year-olds. For the next few days, life settled into a strange rhythm. Kit continued reviewing hospital files remotely whenever possible while also monitoring Alfie's recovery. The enigma remained a terrible patient. He ignored instructions, skipped rest periods, and repeatedly attempted to return to work despite still recovering from multiple gunshot wounds. At least twice a day Kit threatened to sedate him. At least twice a day Alfie calmly informed him that kidnapping a mafia king was probably illegal. Meanwhile, the twins became increasingly attached to him. They played soccer together on the estate grounds. They convinced him to watch cartoons. They even taught him a complicated card game that somehow involved changing rules every 5 minutes whenever they started losing. One afternoon Kit walked into the garden and discovered Alfie kneeling beside a bicycle while Aiden proudly demonstrated how fast he could ride. "You bought them bicycles. They needed exercise. They already had bicycles. These are better bicycles." Kit looked at the obviously expensive custom models. "You're impossible. That's what Jacob keeps telling me." The moment felt surprisingly normal. Dangerously normal. That realization bothered Kit more than he wanted to admit. For years his world had been simple. Work, home, children, repeat. Now Alfie existed in every corner of his daily routine. Sometimes Kit caught himself looking for him automatically. Sometimes he noticed when Alfie missed a meal. Sometimes he found himself smiling before realizing why. Those moments made him uncomfortable. Not because Alfie was an enigma. Not because Alfie was a mafia boss. But because Kit had already buried one mate. Losing Braun had shattered parts of him that never fully healed. Trusting someone again felt reckless. Trusting someone like Alfie felt insane. The turning point arrived late one evening. Kit had been reviewing archived military records using secure databases he still had limited access to from his service years. Most of the files regarding Braun's final mission remained classified, but one overlooked document appeared in an old investigation folder. At first he thought it was a mistake. Then he saw Braun's name. His heartbeat stopped. The document was incomplete. Large sections had been deleted. Entire pages were missing. Yet enough remained to reveal something horrifying. Braun had not been investigating enemy forces before his death. He had been investigating human trafficking, specifically Omega trafficking. Kit read the report 3 times, then 4, then 5. His vision blurred. A second file appeared, then a third, each one linked to the same name.
Eden Program.
A secret organization operating behind legitimate institutions. Medical facilities, research centers, private laboratories. The report ended abruptly. Status of investigator Braun Chase terminated. No explanation followed. No details. No accident report. No recovery report. Nothing. Only terminated. The laptop slipped from Kit's hands. For years he had told himself Braun died in service. For years he had accepted the official story because accepting it hurt less than questioning it. Now that certainty vanished. Someone had killed Braun. Not fate. Not war. Someone. The realization hit him harder than he expected. He sat alone in the dark study for nearly an hour before the door opened quietly. Alfie stepped inside. Neither man spoke at first. Alfie immediately noticed the files. Then he noticed Kit's face. Something in his expression changed. What happened? Kit tried answering. Nothing came out. The second attempt worked only slightly better. Braun didn't die in an accident. The words felt foreign. Unreal. He was investigating something. Alfie approached slowly. What? Kit turned the screen toward him.
Eden Program.
For the first time since meeting him, Alfie looked genuinely shocked. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Then Alfie lowered himself into a nearby chair. I know that name. Kit stared at him. You do? Yes. Alfie's voice became colder. Because I've spent nearly 2 years trying to find them. The room suddenly felt smaller. Every piece of information seemed to collide at once. The missing hospital records. The stolen blood samples. The attack. The surveillance. Boom. Everything pointed toward the same shadow. Kit swallowed hard. Why? Because they buy and sell Omega lives. Alfie's jaw tightened. Because they disappear children. Because they've corrupted hospitals, research institutions, and government agencies. Every lead I find vanishes before I can reach it. Kit looked back at Braun's name. For a moment the grief became overwhelming. All those years. All those unanswered questions. All those nights wondering whether he could have done something differently. The tears came before he could stop them. He hated crying in front of people. Hated appearing vulnerable. Yet somehow he could not make himself leave. Alfie didn't offer empty comfort. Didn't tell him everything would be okay. Didn't tell him to be strong. Instead he simply stayed. Quiet. Present. For reasons Kit could not explain that helped more than words. Eventually Alfie spoke. If Braun died investigating them, then your family was never random. Kit looked up. What do you mean? Alfie's expression darkened. The attack. The blood samples. The surveillance. Someone has been watching you for years. The realization chilled him. Not weeks. Not months. Years. Then Alfie opened another file retrieved from his own investigation. Several photographs appeared on the screen. Laboratory equipment. Medical records. Research subjects. Then a list. Kit felt all the blood leave his face. 2 names appeared among hundreds of coded entries. Iden Chain. Lucan Chain. Target candidates. For a second neither man spoke. Neither breathed. Neither looked away. The twins had never been collateral damage. They had never been random victims of circumstance. Someone had chosen them. Someone had marked them. Someone had been waiting. Outside the study, Faint laughter from Aiden and Lucan echoed through the hallway. Inside the room, Kit stared at their names on the screen and realized that whatever had killed Braun all those years ago was no longer hiding in the past. It was coming for his children. The discovery changed everything. Until that night, Kit had believed he was caught in a dangerous situation because he saved Alfie Romani's life. It was frightening enough to think powerful enemies had started paying attention to him after the emergency surgery. But learning that someone had been tracking his family long before Alfie ever entered the picture made the danger feel far more personal. For the next several days, the estate became less of a safe house and more of a command center. Alfie's people quietly gathered information while Kit dug through every medical record, archived report, and hidden database he could access. The deeper they investigated, the more often one name appeared. Dean Voss, hospital director, respected administrator, philanthropist, public advocate for healthcare reform. On paper, Dean looked untouchable. Behind the scenes, the evidence painted a very different picture. Patients disappearing. Laboratories receiving unauthorized funding. Biological samples transferred between facilities without approval. Research grants connected to shell companies. None of it was enough to expose him publicly, but together the pattern became impossible to ignore. One evening, Kit sat in Alfie's study surrounded by printed documents while Alfie reviewed financial records from his own investigation. Hours passed without either of them noticing until Alfie finally set a file down and looked toward him. "You're staring at the same page." Kit rubbed his eyes. "So are you." Alfie almost smiled. The expression lasted only a second. "What are you seeing?" Kit pointed toward several reports spread across the desk. Everything eventually leads back to hospitals, research centers, fertility clinics, or blood banks. Dean isn't running a trafficking operation. He's running a research network. Alfie's expression darkened. "Keep going." Kit took a slow breath. The Omega victims aren't random. Neither are the children. Whoever built Eden program is looking for something specific. Perfect bloodline. Kit froze. Alfie nodded. "One of my people intercepted that phrase 6 months ago." The words settled heavily between them. Perfect bloodline. It sounded less like science and more like obsession. As the investigation progressed, another problem emerged. Kit's body began reacting strangely. At first he blamed exhaustion, then stress, then grief. The symptoms became harder to ignore. Headaches, restlessness, difficulty sleeping. His pheromones fluctuated without warning despite years of stable suppression. As an experienced Omega, Kit immediately knew something was wrong. What he didn't know was why. 3 nights later, he got his answer. The episode hit suddenly. One moment he was reviewing files in his room. The next, a wave of heat crashed through his body hard enough to force him against the edge of the desk. His suppressants should have prevented it. His medical records showed no history of spontaneous episodes. Nothing about it made sense. Kit barely managed to lock the bedroom door before another wave struck. His pulse raced. His thoughts became scattered. Every instinct screamed for relief, for safety, for someone. The realization terrified him. Someone had done this deliberately. The knock on the door came several minutes later. "Kit." "Alfie." Kit squeezed his eyes shut. "Don't come in." Silence followed. Then Alfie's voice lowered. "What happened?" "My suppressants failed." That wasn't entirely a lie. Another painful wave rolled through him. The silence outside lasted several seconds. Then Alfie spoke again. "They didn't fail." Kit frowned. "What?" "I had them tested after your symptoms started." His stomach dropped. The lock clicked. Alfie entered carrying a medical case. His expression immediately hardened. "They were tampered with." For a moment neither of them moved. The realization was horrifying. Someone had not only targeted Kit. Someone had gained access to medication stored inside a heavily secured estate. Someone was getting closer. Alfie remained near the doorway, far enough to respect boundaries, close enough to help if needed. The gesture affected Kit more than he expected. Most alphas would have struggled. Many enigmas would have viewed the situation differently. Alfie simply sat in a chair several feet away and monitored his condition like a bodyguard assigned to protect a patient. Hours passed. The worst eventually faded. Not once did Alfie move closer than necessary. Not once did he take advantage of the situation. By sunrise, Kit understood something important. Alfie's protectiveness wasn't ownership. It wasn't control. It was respect. The realization stayed with him throughout the following day. That evening they found another breakthrough. One of Alfie's investigators uncovered records linking Dean Voss to a private facility operating beneath an abandoned research center outside the city. The location had existed for years without attracting attention. The official documents described it as a storage facility. The blueprints revealed laboratory wings, holding cells, observation rooms. Everything pointed toward Eden program. The discovery should have felt like progress. Instead, it led to another confrontation. Because for the first time, Dean Voss reached out directly. The message arrived through encrypted channels. Simple, polite, terrifying. Stop looking. Alfie laughed when he read it. Kit didn't. The message proved they were being watched. The next several days became increasingly tense. Security around the estate doubled. The twins remained blissfully unaware of the danger. Iden continued challenging bodyguards to soccer matches. Lucan continued sneaking desserts from the kitchen. Their laughter became one of the few normal things left. Perhaps that was why what happened next hurt so much. The evening began peacefully. The four of them ate dinner together. Twins argued over dessert. Alfie pretended not to spoil them. Kit pretended not to notice. For a few hours they almost felt like a family. After the children went to bed, Kit found himself alone with Alfie on the terrace overlooking the estate grounds. The night air felt unusually calm. Neither spoke for a while. Then Alfie finally broke the silence. "Braun would be proud of you." Kit looked away. "I don't know about that. You never stopped searching for the truth." For a long moment neither man moved. The grief between them felt different now. Less sharp. Less lonely. When Kit finally looked up again, Alfie was already watching him. Something shifted. No dramatic confession. No grand declaration. Just two people who had survived loss recognizing it in each other. The kiss happened quietly. Brief. Gentle. Almost hesitant. It lasted only seconds before both pulled back. Neither seemed entirely certain how it happened. Neither seemed willing to regret it. Then a phone rang. The moment shattered instantly. Jacob's voice came through the speaker. Urgent. Panicked. Boss. Alfie was already standing. What happened? The answer froze the blood in Kit's veins. The children. Silence. Then Jacob continued. They've been taken. Everything stopped. Kit felt the world disappear beneath his feet. Alfie's expression transformed into something terrifying. Not fear. Not panic. Pure fury. A second later another message arrived. A digital invitation. Black background. Gold lettering. Only a few words. Dean Voss requests your presence. The Eden auction. And beneath it was a photograph. Iden and Lucan. Alive. Terrified. Waiting. For the next several hours nobody slept. The estate transformed into a war room as dozens of screens lit up across Alfie's security center, while investigators, hackers, and trusted lieutenants moved between stations, gathering every piece of information they could find. The photograph Dean Voss had sent remained displayed on the largest monitor in the room, showing Iden and Lucan sitting side by side in a brightly lit space that revealed almost nothing about their location. Kit could barely breathe every time he looked at it. His sons were alive. For now. That was the only thing stopping him from completely falling apart. Alfie stood beside him throughout the night, making calls, issuing orders, and directing resources worth millions of dollars toward a single objective. Finding the twins. By sunrise they still had nothing. The frustration was becoming unbearable. Then something unexpected happened. A small voice interrupted a strategy meeting. I know where he is. Every adult in the room turned. Lucan sat quietly on one of the sofas, clutching a blanket around his shoulders. Since escaping the kidnapping, he had barely spoken. Now everyone was staring at him. Kit immediately knelt beside him. What do you mean, baby? Lucan looked confused. Not frightened. Confused. Asleep and awake. Nobody understood. The little Omega frowned as he struggled to explain. Aiden keeps crying. Kit's heart broke. What else? Water. Lucan closed his eyes. Lots of water. Alfie exchanged a glance with Jacob. Still not enough. Then Lucan added something else. Big boats. The room went silent. For the first time, Alfie looked interested. Lucan continued. And music. Jacob suddenly moved toward one of the screens. There. Everyone followed his gaze. One of Alfie's analysts pulled up a map. Several locations appeared. Private docks. Shipping terminals. Marinas. Then another investigator connected the information with old files Braun had hidden before his death. The pieces finally aligned. A private island facility operating through an abandoned shipping company. Officially closed years ago. Unofficially active. And located beside one of the city's largest private harbors. Dean's auction site. Kit stared at the screen. Braun had been trying to expose this place years ago. Now his sons were trapped there. The operation launched before sunset. Dozens of vehicles moved simultaneously while Alfie's men secured every route leading toward the harbor. The official plan involved a covert infiltration, but everyone in the room understood one thing. The moment Dean realized Alfie was coming, subtlety would disappear. The closer they got, the harder Kit found it to stay calm. He should not have been there. Every rational person had told him that. But he refused to remain behind while strangers risked their lives for his children. Alfie had argued exactly once. Kit had refused exactly once. The discussion ended there. By nightfall they reached the island. The facility looked less like a laboratory and more like a luxury resort from the outside, which somehow made everything worse. Elegant architecture hid years of crimes behind polished walls and expensive decorations. As Alfie's people quietly breached the perimeter, Kit followed close behind. The first holding rooms they discovered made his stomach turn. Omega men and women sat behind reinforced glass. Some looked exhausted. Others looked terrified. Several were little more than teenagers. Every one of them wore identification tags instead of names. Kit felt fury replacing fear. This wasn't research. This wasn't science. It was human trafficking disguised as medical progress. The deeper they moved into the complex, the more horrifying the evidence became. Laboratories, observation chambers, genetic records, experimental reports. Everything centered around one obsession. Perfect bloodline. Then they found the auction hall. The sight nearly stopped Kit's heart. Rows of wealthy buyers sat inside an enormous underground auditorium, while security personnel surrounded an illuminated stage. Some of the people present were politicians. Some were business executives. Others belonged to criminal organizations. All of them had come to buy human lives. At the center of the stage stood Dean Voss. Calm, confident, smiling. And beside him stood Aiden. The little boy looked frightened but unharmed. Kit immediately searched for Lucan's twin. Nothing. Only Aiden. A cold fear settled inside him. Where was the other child? Before he could react, another side door opened. Two guards escorted a new figure toward the stage. Kit. The image appeared on a giant screen. Photographs. Medical records. Genetic profiles. Dean's voice echoed through the hall. Rare Omega compatibility. The audience leaned forward. Exceptional biological markers. Several people began bidding before Kit even understood what was happening. Dean was selling information about him. Selling information about his blood. Selling information about his children. Then Dean spoke again. And the sons. The giant screen changed. Aiden. Lucan. Both profiles appeared side by side. The crowd became even more interested. Kit nearly charged onto the stage right then. Alfie grabbed his arm. Wait. Kit looked at him in disbelief. My son is up there. And if you move now, they both die. The words hurt because they were true. Meanwhile, Dean continued his presentation. For the first time, Kit truly saw the man beneath the hospital director mask. No kindness. No compassion. No humanity. Only obsession. Then Dean revealed the final piece. A photograph appeared on the screen. Boom. The entire world seemed to stop. Dean smiled. He was one of our first problems. Kit couldn't breathe. Dean continued speaking as though discussing paperwork. He discovered too much. He refused every offer. Unfortunately, people like that tend to disappear. The confirmation hit harder than any weapon. For years Kit wondered. For years he hoped. Now the truth stood before him. Dean had murdered Braun. Rage flooded through him. Not grief. Not sadness. Rage. Beside him, Alfie's expression became terrifyingly cold. The Enigma King stepped forward. No longer hiding. No longer waiting. The entire auditorium erupted into chaos. Security alarms screamed. Guests panicked. Armed men rushed toward exits. Alfie's soldiers poured into the hall from multiple directions. The auction collapsed instantly. Dean's confident smile finally vanished. Within seconds, the facility became a battlefield. Gunfire echoed through the underground complex as buyers fled and security teams attempted to hold their positions. In the confusion, Kit reached the stage and pulled Aiden into his arms. The little boy immediately burst into tears. "Papa. I'm here." "Aiden, where's your brother?" The child pointed toward another corridor. "They took him downstairs." Kit's blood ran cold. At the same moment Dean reached a hidden exit. Alfie intercepted him. For several seconds neither man moved. Then Dean smiled. "You've already lost." A monitor flickered to life behind him. Lucan appeared on the screen. Alone. Terrified. Strapped to a medical chair. Dean's smile widened. "One child for your empire." Silence filled the room. Then Dean delivered the ultimatum. Surrender everything. The money. The network. The power. Or the boy dies. The room froze. Kit looked at Alfie. Dean expected hesitation. Expected negotiation. Expected greed. Instead Alfie took a step forward. Then another. And another. The Mafia King slowly removed his weapon and dropped it onto the floor. Gasps echoed through the room. Dean looked shocked. Alfie's voice remained calm. "Take it." Dean blinked. "What?" "The Empire." Kit stared at him. Every lieutenant stared at him. Every guard stared at him. Alfie never took his eyes off the screen showing Lucan. "Take everything." Then for the first time, the Enigma spoke words that stunned the entire room. "Just don't touch my son." And in that moment, Kit realized this was no longer about protection, debt, or gratitude. Somewhere along the way, Alfie Romani had truly become family. Unfortunately, Dean's smile returned. Because surrender had never been enough. And the weapon hidden in Dean's sleeve was already moving toward Alfie. The hidden gun appeared so quickly that most people in the room never saw it. Dean Voss had spent years pretending to be a respectable hospital director, but beneath the polished image he had always been a survivor, and survivors rarely surrendered quietly when everything they built began collapsing around them. The shot exploded through the auditorium. Alfie moved at the exact same moment. Kit never knew whether the Enigma saw the weapon first or simply reacted on instinct, but the result was the same. Alfie shoved Dean's arm aside just enough to change the trajectory. The bullet missed his heart but tore through his side, reopening wounds that had barely finished healing. The impact drove him backward. Chaos erupted again. Jacob's men surged forward. Security teams crashed into each other. Several of Dean's buyers attempted to flee. Others drew weapons. Within seconds the room became a battlefield. Kit barely noticed any of it. His attention remained locked on Alfie. Blood was already spreading through the Enigma's shirt. Too much blood. Far too much. Years of medical training immediately took over. Kit dropped beside him while the gunfire continued around them. "Stay awake." Alfie grimaced. "I've heard that before. This isn't the time for jokes. That's usually when I make them." Despite the situation, Kit almost laughed. Then Jacob's voice roared across the room. "We found the boy." Everything stopped. Not literally. The fighting continued. The alarms continued. But for Kit, only those 4 words mattered. They found Lucan. Several minutes later, the younger twin came running through the doorway surrounded by armed guards. The moment he saw his family, He broke into tears and sprinted across the room. "Papa!" Kit caught him immediately. Then Aiden joined them. For several seconds all three clung together while the world collapsed around them. The twins were shaking. Kit was shaking. Nobody cared. They were alive. That was enough. Meanwhile, Dean's final escape attempt lasted less than 30 seconds. The underground facility was surrounded. His buyers had abandoned him. His security teams were surrendering. Every file, laboratory, and database belonging to Eden program had already been copied by Alfie's people and transmitted to federal investigators. Years of secrets disappeared in a single night. When Jacob finally dragged Dean back into the center of the room in handcuffs, the former hospital director no longer looked powerful. He looked small, pathetic, defeated. Kit expected satisfaction. Instead, he felt tired. Braun was still gone. No arrest would change that. No prison sentence would return the years they lost. Dean looked toward Kit one last time. Braun would have died anyway. The words barely left his mouth before Alfie stepped forward. Not with violence. Not with threats. Only with a calm certainty that somehow felt colder.
"No."
Dean frowned. Alfie's voice remained steady. "He died protecting people. You'll die remembered as a monster." For the first time all night, Dean looked away. By sunrise, the operation was over. Federal authorities flooded the island. Victims were evacuated. Evidence was secured. News helicopters circled overhead. For the first time in years, Eden program no longer existed in the shadows. Several days later, the entire country learned the truth. The scandal dominated every news network. Hospitals, research facilities, government officials, investors. Dozens of arrests followed. More came every week. The empire Dean built collapsed faster than anyone expected because it had always depended on secrecy. Once exposed, it could not survive. For Kit, however, the real healing began somewhere much quieter. It started in a hospital room. Not as a nurse. Not as a patient. Simply as a man sitting beside another man who refused to rest. Alfie's injuries were serious but not fatal. The doctors promised a full recovery. That did not stop Kit from checking every monitor personally. On the third night, Alfie finally looked at him. "You know I'm not dying. You said that last time. And I was right. You technically stopped breathing." Details. Kit shook his head. The familiar banter felt comforting. Normal. Something neither of them had experienced in a very long time. A few days later, Kit visited Braun's grave for the first time since learning the truth. The twins stood beside him. Alfie remained several steps back, giving him space. The autumn wind moved quietly through the cemetery. For years Kit carried guilt he never deserved. For years he wondered whether he should have done more. Tried harder. Asked different questions. Now the burden finally began lifting. Braun had not abandoned them. Braun had fought until the end. And because of that fight, countless people would now live. When they left the cemetery, Kit felt lighter than he had in years. Not healed, but healing. Months passed. The city slowly moved on. The headlines faded. The investigations continued. Life returned. Kit eventually rented a building downtown and transformed it into a support center for Omega victims and displaced children. Officially, the funding came from private donors. Unofficially, everyone involved knew Alfie was responsible for most of it. The Enigma denied it every time. Nobody believed him, especially not the twins. By then, Aiden and Lucan spent so much time around Alfie that half the staff already considered him family. One afternoon, Kit walked into the center and discovered Alfie helping with a children's art project. The sight alone nearly broke his brain. The feared Mafia king sat at a tiny table while several children covered his expensive jacket in paint. He looked completely miserable. The children looked delighted. Kit took a picture. Alfie threatened to confiscate his phone. Kit kept the photo. Some battles were worth fighting. The biggest surprise came a few weeks later. Family court approved the adoption paperwork. The process had taken months. Background checks, interviews, legal reviews. Yet somehow everything succeeded. The twins received the news first. Their celebration nearly destroyed the office. That evening they held a small gathering at the center. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, staff members, children, people who mattered. At some point during the celebration, Aiden climbed onto a chair and raised a plastic cup. "I have an announcement." Everyone immediately became nervous. Lucan nodded beside him. "We officially have two papas now." The room erupted into laughter. Kit covered his face. Alfie looked completely defeated. The twins looked incredibly proud of themselves. Later that evening, after most guests left, Kit stepped onto the rooftop terrace for some fresh air. A few minutes later Alfie joined him. Neither spoke immediately. The city lights stretched across the horizon below them. Peaceful. Normal. Everything they nearly lost. Finally Alfie broke the silence. "I kept my promise." Kit looked at him. "You did. No guards following you.
No interference.
No pressure." Kit smiled softly. "You still funded half the city. That doesn't count." "It absolutely counts." Alfie laughed quietly. Then his expression grew more serious. For a moment Kit thought he might change the subject. Instead Alfie met his eyes. "If this isn't about debt anymore." The words hung between them. "If this isn't about gratitude." His voice softened. "If it's just me." Kit's heart accelerated. Alfie stepped closer. "Would you let me be part of your family?" Before Kit could answer, two familiar voices erupted from behind the rooftop door. "Say yes." Both twins burst onto the terrace. Kit groaned. Alfie laughed. The boys looked entirely unapologetic. "We heard everything. Most of it. Enough of it." Kit shook his head. Then he looked back at Alfie. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel frightening. It felt possible. So he stepped forward and kissed him. Not hurried. Not uncertain.
Orealkish.
The kind that belonged to a beginning instead of an ending. When they finally pulled apart, both twins immediately started cheering. Somewhere below, several staff members joined them. Kit considered moving to another city. Alfie looked entirely too pleased with himself. And for the first time since Braun's death, Kit realized something important. Family was not only the people you lost. Sometimes it was the people who stayed. The people who chose you. The people who fought to remain beside you when everything else fell apart. Looking at Alfie and the twins laughing together beneath the city lights, Kit knew exactly where he belonged. Not because fate demanded it. Not because blood decided it. But because all four of them had chosen each other. And that choice changed everything. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If you enjoyed Kit, Alfie, and their journey from survival to family, please leave a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps keep these ABO stories alive, and I'll see you in the next adventure.